Beat the Streets, a nonprofit here in the city of Boston. And I'm also a member of the Superintendent Search Committee. Today, we're offering interpretation in the 9 BPS languages spoken by our families. The interpretation feature has already been turned on. For Mandarin interpretation, you'll please join the Chinese channel. And I hope that others can see that there should be a slide projecting some of the instructions for selecting interpretation. Here it is. So this should indicate to you where to make that selection. Please note that everyone needs to join a channel, including English speakers. So if you want to listen to the conversation in English, please join the English channel by clicking on the globe icon at the bottom of your screen. And to support our ASL interpreters, please name yourself before speaking. Participants, please note that if you would like to have the ASL interpreter box larger, you can pin this panelist by clicking on the 3 buttons in the top right of that box and selecting pin. Today's meeting is being recorded to serve as a resource for school committee members and to make available for those who cannot be here today. To preserve the integrity of this process, the candidate is using a BPS issued laptop and is not allowed to refer to their phone during the panel interview. The Superintendent Search Committee has been tasked by the school committee to conduct a thorough search. Beginning in March, we began by hosting a series of public listening sessions and community stakeholder meetings. The feedback voiced by students, families, educators, and other community partners was incorporated into the superintendent's job description and informed the search committee members' interview questions. Beginning with 34 candidates, the search committee narrowed the pool to 8 candidates throughout May and June and conducted several rounds of interviews with the candidates. On Friday, June 16th, the search committee conducted its final deliberations and voted to select a group of finalists for the school committee's consideration. 2 candidates have since withdrawn from the process prior to the start of public interviews this week. The 2 final candidates are Mary Skipper, Superintendent of Somerville Public Schools, and Dr. Tommy Welch, Region 1 School Superintendent at the Boston Public Schools. Today's panel is with Mary Skipper, and tomorrow's will be with Dr. Tommy Welch. Before we get to the agenda, I'd like to briefly introduce members of our panel of community members who will be with me interviewing Ms. Skipper. Participating this morning include Sean Brown, Kate Barand, Aisha Francis, Denise Casraway, Marta Rivera, Marinelle Roumaneer, and Daisa Santana. Each panelist has prepared a question, and I will mix panelist questions with questions from the public. We've drawn from the suggested questions that many of you had at the public listening sessions and throughout through the Superintendent Search Survey launched in March. We also invite you to submit your questions live using the Q&A function in Zoom at the bottom of your screen, and we will ask a limited number of live questions as time permits during our 90 minutes together. So I'm going to pause there. So I am being advised that our candidate is not yet here. And so what would you like me to do? Okay, I believe she's joining in like 30 seconds. Our apologies.
Mary Skipper, are you here?
I will be right there. They're just connecting my by speaker. Hold on one second.
Okay.
Sorry for my tardiness. I was in the last meeting. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear
Yes,
you.
we can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, so let's continue. At this time, I'm going to invite Marinelle Roumaneer from our panelists to kick us off with the first panelist question.
Good morning, Ms. Skipper. It's
Good
very nice to
morning.
see you. My name is Marinelle Roumaneer, and I'm the president and CEO of Advestors, which, for those of you who don't know, is an education nonprofit that partners deeply with BPS at both the school and district level, bringing financial resources, implementation support, and education expertise to our shared work. We work in arts education, math education, career pathways, and racial equity in schools, along with our effort to spotlight improving schools through our School in the Move Prize. Through our work, and I think all of us know, Boston is rich in resources, yet too often not strategic in how they're deployed. We also know that the school district can't address the many needs of its constituencies alone. Please talk to get us started this morning about how you will harness the extraordinary partnership potential that Boston possesses among its nonprofit, higher education, philanthropic, and business communities. It would be great if through your answer, you could include an example of how you've previously engaged with multiple partners to better serve young people.
Great. So first of all, thank you. Nice to see you, and I appreciate the question. So my career has been really about trying to build coalition and building particularly across partners, nonprofit, philanthropic, business, and I think first of all, in order to have strong partnerships, it's best to have them be sustained, long term. Understand on both sides, both the partner side and on the school or the district side, what's needed, what can be contributed. And I think those are the healthiest partnerships when there's a little bit of giving on both sides. So looking for partners and building out the menu of partners, that would be something I would be keen to. I think in terms of where the schools are, doing some partner audits and understanding what their current partner base looks like, what's working, what's not, and then being able to fill holes by going out to the partners through work groups, having conversations about needs that we see at the district level, but also at the school level would be a next step. It's best when that match happens and in a very positive way, so that both the partner and the organization feels the change, right, in a positive direction. So I would see sort of that auditing leading to more strategic use of the partnerships. I will say that, here in Boston, one of the things that excites me most is, and always has been how our partners galvanize around need and urgency. So what comes to mind is, when I was creating Tech Boston with a team, we literally could not have launched that school had it not been for the cross-sector partnership of the tech industry, which came to bear both resources and training, philanthropic. We had 3 or 4 of the foundations that were working on various areas of the organization as that school was being built, helping with data and helping with evaluation to the workforce. And we partnered strongly with the business community as a way for our graduates and our students to get real, authentic, meaningful experience out in businesses, doing tech work, doing business work. And so that held true, and many of those partners stayed over the course of Tech Boston for a decade. And that is actually what allowed that school to start from what was a little bit of money from the Gates Foundation to really a village actually raising that school. Similarly, in Somerville, I think one of the holes that we had that we made a call for was our out of school time. You know, we recognized that when students were leaving us, they had very minimal choice in what they could do in the after school hours. So when we talk here in Boston about safety and we talk about, you know, student engagement, one of the best things we could do is work together as a coalition to identify what students can do from 3 o'clock on and what students can do on Saturdays and Sundays, and start to really coalesce and build a menu for schools to draw from and students to work with. We were able to do that in Somerville, you know, certainly on a smaller level, but it was city partnership, it was workforce development partnership, and it was certainly our nonprofit and philanthropic that came to the table to allow us to have new partners in that work. So I would personally be very excited about doing this. I think it's what distinguishes Boston. This is Boston, and this is the hub for so much resource. It's getting that resource in a strategic way to the needs of the students.
I'll just follow up briefly, Ms. Skipper, with just a question about what would be your observation of what have been the barriers in the past to making that happen, and how would you tackle them?
So I think it's an understanding, you know, with 123 schools, it's an understanding of where the schools are and what they need and their ability to actually maintain a partnership. You know, you have to cultivate that, you have to support that. Sometimes just adding in a partner or a resource, if they're not ready, isn't going to help them in the way that it needs to. Similarly, asking of a partner something that's not in their comfort zone or their area of expertise, that will be a mismatch. So I think really having an office that's focusing on this matching, on this ongoing support, on this training will be essential. If students are going out into workforce and part of that is authentic learning and they're getting to apply their skills in internships or whatnot, what needs to happen is preparation for that, training, support, mentorship. There's lots that needs to happen. They don't just show up day one in the business and the business says, oh, we know exactly what to do. So I think, you know, part of that struggle could be how the system being ready to identify what is its needs, the schools being able to identify what those are, and then having workforce group or working groups that can work across philanthropic, across nonprofit, across business, across higher ed in a way that allows us to kind of match the need and the resource in the right way. So that would be my intent. So I would plan to be meeting a lot with all 4 of those sectors.
Wonderful. Many thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to, this is Annie Chin speaking from BPS. I just wanted to jump in and say we've been having some technical difficulties. So what we're going to have to do is start over at 11 so that the entire public can join this process. Unfortunately, one of the Zoom links was not working properly. So we just posted the correct link. We have 83 attendees right now, and the numbers keep growing, and we're tweeting out the proper link. I'm so sorry about the technical difficulties. What we'll do is start at 11 and start over, and then we will begin at 11. Thank you.
Okay.
Consider it a dress rehearsal.
There you go, right? All right. Thanks, Marinelle.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I apologize so much for our technical difficulties. I believe we now have the correct Zoom link for all our attendees and our panelists today. So I just want to apologize, but it's also important that we get the process right and that we have everyone participate who is able to. So again, good morning. Welcome to the Community Partners panel. This is the first day of 2 in a series of panel discussions with finalists, candidates for the Boston Public Schools Superintendent. My name is Jose Valenzuela, and I'm a teacher at Boston Latin Academy now. I am here right now. I am also a parent of a BPS student. I'm an alum of the Boston Public Schools. I am the founder of Beat the Streets New England, a nonprofit working here in Boston, and I am a member of the Superintendent Search Committee. We are offering interpretation today in the 9 BPS languages. The interpretation feature has already been turned on. For Mandarin interpretation, please join the Chinese channel. And hopefully you are able to see the instructions projected on the screen, but if not, I will just note that you should be joining from the button that you see below the globe icon. It's important to note that everyone needs to join a channel, including English speakers. I am doing that as we speak right now, so I don't forget either. And if you want to listen to the conversation in English, please join the English channel by clicking on the globe icon at the bottom of your screen. And there it is there, indicated on the, projected on the screen here. To support our ASL interpreters, please name yourself before speaking. Participants, please note that if you would like to have the ASL interpreter box larger, you can pin this panelist by clicking on the 3 buttons in the top right of that box and selecting pin. Today's meeting is being recorded to serve as a resource for school committee members and to make available for those who cannot be here today. To preserve the integrity of this process, the candidate is using a BPS issued laptop and is not allowed to refer to their phone during the panel interview. The Superintendent Search Committee has been tasked by the school committee to conduct a thorough search. Beginning in March, we began by hosting a series of public listening sessions and community stakeholder meetings. The feedback voiced by students, families, educators, and other community partners was incorporated into the superintendent's job description and informed the search committee members' interview questions. Beginning with 34 candidates, the search committee narrowed the pool to 8 candidates throughout May and June and conducted several rounds with the candidates. On Friday, June 16th, the search committee conducted its final deliberations and voted to select a group of finalists for the school committee's consideration. 2 candidates have since withdrawn from the process prior to the start of public interviews. And the 2 final candidates are Mary Skipper, Superintendent of Somerville Public Schools, and Dr. Tommy Welch, Region 1 School Superintendent of Boston Public Schools. Today's panel is with Mary Skipper, and tomorrow's will be with Dr. Tommy Welch. Before we get to the agenda, I'd like to briefly introduce members of our panel of community partners who will be interviewing Ms. Skipper. Participating this afternoon include Sean Brown, Kate Barand, Aisha Francis, Denise Casraway, Marta Rivera, Marinelle Roumaneer, and Daisa Santana. Each panelist has prepared a question, and I will mix panelist questions with questions from the public. We've drawn from the suggested questions that many of you suggested at the public listening sessions and through the Superintendent Search Survey launched in March. We also invite you to submit your questions live using the Q&A function in Zoom at the bottom of your screen. We'll ask a limited number of live questions as time permits during our time together. At this time, I'm going to invite Marinelle Roumaneer from our panelists to kick us off with the first panelist question.
Thank you, Jose, and welcome, Ms. Skipper. My name is Marinelle Roumaneer, and I'm a BPS parent, as well as the president and CEO of Advestors, which is an education nonprofit that partners deeply with the Boston Public Schools. We bring financial resources, implementation support, and education expertise to our shared work in arts education, math education, career pathways, and racial equity. We also highlight what's working in BPS through our annual School on the Move Prize. So for my question, I'll start with an observation that we know Boston is rich in resources and too often not strategic in how they are deployed. We also know the school district can't address the many needs of its constituencies alone. It would be great if you could talk about how you will harness the extraordinary partnership potential that Boston possesses among its nonprofit, higher education, philanthropic, and business communities. It'd be helpful if through your answer, you could include an example of how you've previously engaged with multiple partners to better serve young people.
Great. Well, hello, I'm Marinelle, and thank you very much for the question. So I think first I just talk a little bit about where and how I've seen partnerships work best. I think they work best when they're sustained, they're in over time to deepen the partnership, and where at the start it's clear of what the partner is looking and able to do and what the school or the district needs and is able to do to really have an effective relationship. So I think that communication, that match at the beginning is essential. And then having some work along the way to kind of deepen it and deepen the partnership. That's where I think it really becomes very fruitful. We are so fortunate in Boston to have everything we have. I mean, this is a city of resources. Our nonprofits, our philanthropic, who have always been so intimately involved in our school district, our workforce and our unions and labor and how they come to the table, as well as our post-secondary. So, we're really at no shortage for the opportunity for partnerships. What we were able to do in the high school network when I was here in Boston before, there were 36 schools, and each school really had a different profile and different needs. And so we did a lot of partnering indexing, or trying to find out and understand what kinds of partners that each of the high schools at that time were looking for to deepen the work. In some cases, it might have been academic support. In some cases, it might have been enrichment. It might have been after school or during school or evenings or weekends. In some cases, it might have been resources or opportunities for students to go out and be able to spend time in internships. So we really kind of did a matching, and we did that through a lot of work grouping with the partners and understanding what they thought they were able to give and what they would need in order to do the partnership. And then really kind of cultivated strategically those partnerships and matches. So I would see us needing to do something similar. I think, there's been work done in this area, but I think it's really good with 123 schools, a big portfolio of schools and geographic, to understand where are the holes, what's working well, what partnerships are working well, hold those up as kind of best practice, learn from them, but then also identify where there's need, where there's holes, to be able to make sure that the resources are getting to the students. That's really the critical piece, the resources to the students. How you do that is through a lot of conversation, a lot of work grouping. We have lots of big work groups in the different sectors. And I think that there's a number of examples I can give from my own career that I felt blessed, like Tech Boston, for instance. As a school, we got a small seed grant from the Gates Foundation to begin, but that was only a small piece of what we would ultimately need to become the school that we became. And it really took the tech industry coming to the table and the tech partners that were in Boston and around Greater Boston. They came in and they did everything from professional development to some of the equipment to letting our teachers do externships. So there was real intentionality, to philanthropic, who supported some of our evaluation and being able to collect data and systems to look at what was working and what wasn't, or some academic component in instructional supports. To the post-secondary, and working with Success Boston and that model to ensure that our students had early college opportunities, articulation agreements with the local colleges. And at day's end, it took that village to raise Tech Boston up. Prior to that, it really wouldn't have gotten off the ground. But because of the way that our partners come together in Boston in a strategic, unified way, we're able to do things that other cities just aren't able to do. And that's what excites me, like the idea of getting back to that work. I think on a mini level up in Somerville, we sort of saw this with student safety and really thinking about, when students are away from us, 3 o'clock on, students are away from us in the evening or on the weekends. what's happening for them. And so we decided to really tackle, as part of our children's cabinet, out of school time. And to do that effectively, we had to bring to the table a bunch of partners that were nonprofits, some actually Boston nonprofits, definitely some grant dollars to structure it, and foundational support, and workforce and the city. And by doing all of that, we were able to take a menu that was actually only impacting a small, like 600-700 students, and expand that to where now it's impacting, 1/3 or 1/2 of our students in some way, shape, or form. And use data to make sure that at every level, we're checking back in to make sure the partners are getting what they need in the support, and that the schools and district are getting what they need. And so it's that power of coalition that we have the ability to do here in Boston at a level no one else does. So I would welcome and look forward and spend a lot of time working with our partner agencies to get this to happen.
Many thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Next up is Aisha Francis.
Good morning, Dr. Skipper. My name is Aisha Francis. I am the president and CEO of Benjamin Franklin Cummings Institute of Technology. I am also a Boston Public School parent of 2 children. And the question that I have relates to the type of education that we offer at the college. Benjamin Franklin Cummings Institute of Technology is Boston's only technical college, and we exist to make technical and trade education that carries college credential more affordable and accessible to all, and also to make sure that it's delivered at this intersection of personalized support, hands-on learning, and a curriculum that's been vetted by industry. And so my question is that over the past several years, Boston Public Schools has rolled out several efforts to boost college attainment among its students, and it's still frankly lower than it should be. We've seen efforts such as Success Boston, of which we are a part, which is really focused on an equity agenda, but also discussions of deepening investment in early college and international baccalaureate programs, as well as expanding AP access. And so the question is, how do you suggest and propose to boost the momentum in really getting the college graduation rates of Boston Public Schools where they should be without going back to the drawing board yet again?
Right. So first of all, huge respect for Ben Franklin, an institution that we worked with very closely at Tech Boston, and frankly do in Somerville as well. And for the reason that you say that, when our students go on there and they're able to go on there in a non-traditional kind of pathway, but to get the supports they need, to get that credentialing, we need more of that, frankly. So first of all, I would build off of what's being done, right? I think a lot of the things that have been identified, like early college and IB and AP, right? Those are all great ways to be able to increase students' opportunities to go on to college. I think what we have to look at is, who is that impacting and who is it not impacting? And then we have to start building some programs that might be more beneficial to students who might not be at that point of taking APs or enrolling in early college, or might have some other barriers. So, for instance, we could look at 13th year programming. So, we know that some of our graduates are just not quite ready both to graduate and without an enormous amount of support access a college. Why not create 13th year that allows some dual enrollment so that they could stay with us and be able to get a lot of the social emotional support and even academic support, and at the same time start to make the transition to a Ben Franklin or to another community college, so that their transition is a little bit different and slower than some of these other programs, which just sort of are an on-ramp. So I would want to look at the data. I would want to see who are the programs we currently have accelerating college placement. What are those programs and how are they doing? And then who are they not serving? who's not able to access them. And then I would want to build those up. And that might be dual enrollment rather than early college of the student leaving to go to the college. That might be dual enrollment where the class is actually happening at the local school, where the student can get to, feels more comfortable, and has kind of their support network there. I also think there's this difference between access and persistence. And we want both, right? We want to open up access to all students for college and career, but we also want to focus on making sure that once students are in their placements, that they are successful and that they can persist to get their technical degree or their degree or the certification. And so I think we have to look at that and say, how have those numbers changed over time? That was a big focus of Success Boston, and I think has been a big success. But then there's population and slices of the population for whom they're still not persisting. And so obviously with the pandemic, it's been pretty widespread. But let's look at the populations and figure out what's the additional supports we need to do. Perhaps it's expanding college coaching. Perhaps it's expanding at the secondary level and the high school level, a counselor model that actually follows the students. Perhaps it's some bridge programming that could take place through you Aspire or one of our other college prep program partners to be able to provide that bridge for our students. But I think it's expanding access and at the same time, making sure our ultimate goal is that students can persist in where they are. And by doing that, we need to make sure they're prepared. So if some of the persistence issues are not just around financial or organizational or coaching, but they're actually rooted in academics, and students are kind of getting caught in that trap of taking remedial courses again and again, then that's something more that we have to address at the high school level, more than just mass core and saying mass core. We need to make sure that in literacy and numeracy, in math, that our students are able to go on and not have to take a lot of remedial classes. So that would be work that could be done at the secondary level as well. And I think all of these things kind of together, in addition to having the kind of coalition Success Boston did of pulling the partners together to have those conversations with the field, because I think that's the key, is what's the field seeing in the students that are succeeding and persisting and the students who are not and who are struggling. I think it's looking at that and then building a menu of additional programming to address for those students.
Thank you for your reply.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. This is Jose speaking. So next up, we're actually going to take a question from the public. This was submitted anonymously through our superintendent search survey, but I actually noticed coincidentally that this question came up in our Q&A, and I apologize for the bells that are ringing in that school. So here's the question. How do you plan to expand access to high quality vocational education and seek to partner with businesses and labor unions to create more opportunities?
Yeah. So, Madison Park is extremely exciting. It is, I don't think you can have a great system unless your system includes a really great voc CTE school or program, because that expands the amount of opportunities that students get and should have. So I would want to build off of what's happening at Madison. I would want to be able to go in there and sort of with the business community determine, there's definitely union job and there's definitely the traditional industry areas that we would look to expand. And we want to make sure data-wise that both there's a demand for that and that the kids are interested in that. So I think it's both. But then there's also opportunities for other kinds of skill building that can be done for students that allow them into other entrees, right? We call these more like Chapter 74 pathways. And I think that there's a potential there to be able to have that more prevalent, so that students who aren't necessarily ready to commit to trade are ready to commit to gaining valuable skills that make them employable, make them be able to come out. So I'd want to look at that. I think, one of the things is obviously helping people to understand what vocational and CTE ed is. And so I'd love to see programming in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in BPS, where students are getting a chance to go to Madison. They're getting a chance to see the shops. They have some rotation in their schedule where they actually get to talk to the students who are now in those vocations and understand what the difference is, and really get attracted to the potential of going to Madison, even if they haven't figured out what they want to do, knowing how many opportunities and options are there for them to do. I think that can be done, through both the Madison students going down into the middle schools, and I think it can also be done by the middle schoolers coming to Madison. I also think there's a potential over the summer, and this is a program that we've just started in Somerville, but I think it would work well here too, which is over the summer having 100 students or so actually going through a multiple week rotation in each of the shops. It's like a mini exploration, and really giving them a chance to sort of see all that Madison has to offer. I think in this way, you create attraction, you create kind of that enrollment of students who are making a choice, and it's an actual choice, and you could do the same thing with parents. I would also love to see adult ed really married into Madison, so that students who might have left us but want to continue to learn in an adult role can do that, and they can do it in their technical education. So whether it's workforce development and kind of working again with workforce, PIC and other workforce agencies to be able to determine what are those areas of industry that could be most impactful. Like it might be life sciences, right, and bio, or it could be machinery, whatever tends to be sort of the hot kinds of industries. Then making that open and available to our adults, in particular our adult students who might be 3, 4, 5 years out of school for their retooling. So there'd be, in my mind, a lot of focus on making sure Madison has the resources, the facility piece, making sure the shops have the latest equipment, because that's also a big component of this. And then the communication and attraction of what Madison is, and helping our students to see themselves in it years before.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, next up is Denise Casraway.
Good morning, Ms. Skipper. I'm Denise Casraway.
Good morning.
I am a proud mother of 2 BPS students. I'm also the clinical director of Youth Connect. We are a program of the Boys and Girls Club, and we have a partnership with the Boston Police Department. Youth Connect serves the most at-risk young people in the city of Boston. We take referrals from the Boston Police Department, and we provide comprehensive wraparound, voluntary, free, confidential clinical services to kids and families. All of our staff are licensed clinical social workers. Our services are home, school, and community-based, and we serve youth within the context of their whole families in partnership with other service providers. Our goal as a violence prevention program is to improve the overall functioning of young people and their families at home, school, and in the community. So school, we see school as a huge protective factor. Can you talk a little bit about the successful strategies that you've been able to, that you're proud of, that you've been able to employ that reflect collaborative community partnerships that maintain the safety of children in and out of school time?
Sure. So first of all, your organization sounds amazing. And I wish we had the equivalent of it, which we don't in Somerville, but I think we have to address it in several ways. I think my experience has been that given the pandemic, especially, that the social and emotional needs of students and families are heightened. We have traditional partners that might, provide activities and enrichments in certain areas. But what they're encountering is that when students are coming in, they're not regulated enough, even in those activities, to really be able to gain access to them. So we've actually partnered our social workers. We've partnered some of our school folks. The city has used its resources, and we partner those very deliberately with some of those community partners so that there's somebody there in the day, after school, evenings, and out of school time. And that's been very effective because for the student, there is an outlet, and at the same time for the staff, they don't have to be experts in that area. So I would want to see how we could kind of, deepen that piece. I think the out of school time is the part I would spend a little bit of time on in this, because I think that's when we talk about safety. I think, there's keeping kids safe, which is our primary goal in school, right? In addition to all the rest. And then there's when they leave us. And this is what, as every educator, we worry about it, right? I worry all weekend, I worry in the evening, what's happening for my kids, what's happening for my students. And so I think the more that we can create these kind of creative partnerships between what's already out there in the city and what needs an injection of resource are added to make them something that can serve additional kids, but most importantly, the kids that most need it, that would be my focus. And I would want to look across, the geographics of our city to make sure that from an equity lens, that it's distributed, that they're not just happening in city centers, but they're actually able to be happening in the furthest parts of Boston. And sometimes that means language capacity building. Sometimes that means the ability to be able to help with specific special education strategies. So really looking at school understanding and information and marrying that with the partners in a way that enables us to serve all kids. I think in that way you build a menu. And my experience in our out of school time is that's what we've had to do. We've had to do that for the last 2 years in a much more deliberate way. Whether it's working with, like, say, the YMCA that may or may not have counselors available, and then providing those counselors or providing somebody from staff that's continuity. The other thing we've done is the reverse engineering, which is to take the school buildings themselves and to open them, because the students will say, I feel safest in my school. That's the place, that's my comfort zone, that's my place. And so where that's the case, the students have asked us, can you open the schools after school and into the evening, perhaps to do supper programming, perhaps so that, could you have a counselor there? Could you have a substance abuse counselor there? Because I'm not comfortable talking about my problem during the day, but I would be comfortable when there's less kids around having that conversation with somebody that I thought could help me or for my friend. And so we've started to identify multiple community centers in schools or youth zones in schools as pop-ups that can open for periods of time that kids would be more comfortable staying for or being a part of, and then bringing the resources in. And that might be taking a resource from the community and bringing it in, partnered with the school resource. So I think there's lots of different ways that we could work on the community collaborative side to get out what the students need right now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up is Sean Brown.
Good morning, Mary Skipper.
Good morning,
Ms.
Sean
Skipper.
Brown.
I am doing well. My name is Sean Brown. I am the Executive Director of Youth Guidance Boston, where I oversee our 2 school-based counseling programs in Becoming a Man and Working on Womanhood Wow. We are a proud partner of the Boston, Cambridge, and Somerville School District. Youth Guidance is a leading provider of outcome-driven programs and capacity building initiatives directly serving 14,000 young youth across the country. In 2001, our Becoming a Man program was launched at Youth Guidance to help young men navigate difficult circumstances that threaten their future, addressing youth violence in the school to prison pipeline. Our sister program was launched in 2011 as an innovative response to the urgent need to reach young women of color across under-resourced communities. Both our BAM and WOW programs are strategically designed to create safe and student-centered supports that promotes academic and social emotional development in our young men and women. So, Ms. Skipper, partners in the district have provided supplemental enrichment to students in support of their social emotional learning. How do you intend to support and enhance the relationship between BPS and community partners for benefit of student social and emotional well-being?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. Huge shout out to BAM and to WOW, deep partner with us in Somerville. I think BAM and WOW are really good examples of the kind of deep community partner that you can have that directly impacts students. I think there are some partnerships that can be brought in that are very surface. They might be holistic, the whole school or larger groups. And then I think there are those that are really coming in with a strong sense of mission and purpose, which is how I would categorize BAM and WOW, that are just vital partners with us. What I think is very powerful is when you can embed actual clinical or actual social emotional support in a partnership that also has some broader kind of objectives. So for instance, the academic support, the opportunity support, that BAM or WOW on Root does in Somerville, here in Boston. I think that's very important. But I also think it's creating for the students a peer group and a safe place that they feel they can go that's different from their school staff, that's with their peers, to be able to talk about what's on their heart and minds. And it's that kind of release that I think, particularly over the last decade, but with the pandemic, with all the racial injustice and murder going on, I think it's that space that's given our students, and they're so thankful to have it, the ability to come together and be able to process it with somebody that's trained to process it, and as a group be able to support each other. So that would be the kind of deep partnerships that would have direct impact on students that I would like to see. And whatever that means on the school district side, that might mean a financial commitment, that might mean a different kind of resource commitment, that could mean a space commitment. There's lots of different ways that I think the district would contribute to that. But the attraction of partners like that, because we can't do this work ourselves, all by ourselves. I think it's the attraction of partners like yourself and like some of the ones that have been on here that are going to ultimately make the difference in the success of BPS, because they're about going to the student level.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. This is Jose speaking. So next we're going to take another question from the public. This is again another question submitted anonymously through the Superintendent Search Survey. So here is the question. How will you improve BPS arts education and increase links between students and Boston's strong and vibrant arts community?
So, I think unfortunately, we often term things like arts and music as less than core. They're enrichment, they're other things. I see them very much as core. Our goal is to educate whole children, right? And whole children have lots of different ways they need to express. And sometimes the very student that doesn't express themselves in academics is beautifully expressive in art or in music, or in phys ed, in sports. And so I think it's really building out our menu so that we don't kind of sideline, but make very prominent our arts education, music education, and so forth, as a way to be able to reach all children. So my intent would to be look at what's currently being offered. How do we increase that? How do we increase that in the schedule? But then where that's not possible, then what can we do with the out of school time and bringing arts to students? I'd love to see, arts in a way, arts needs to reach all students. And this is the other place that I really would like to drill down on a little bit here, but arts can't just be for regular education students. Arts is equally important for our special education students. It's equally important for our ELL students. And sometimes with the way schedules of services are, it's hard to do that, but there's also creative ways to do that. Whether, it's in art therapy or music therapy or adaptive PE. I think there's lots of ways we can look to ensure all students are benefiting from the arts. So these would be areas that I will be looking at. I mean, commitment in Somerville has always been about whole child. And so this is something for 7 years that we've worked hard to make sure that it comes off the sideline and it stays extremely prominent. And given the art community here in Boston, and the museums that are in Boston, this is the perfect place for applied learning. This is the perfect place where art doesn't need to be taught in a classroom. Art could actually be taught someplace else. Art could actually, students could be going to the museums, particularly at high school level. They could be going to museums, they could be going to ceramic shop, they could be going and applying their learning and getting that experience in a different way for credit. So I think those are kind of, to me, the exciting ways of how we leverage all that's going on in Boston and really open our campus so it isn't defined by 4 walls, but it instead really, takes full advantage of the rich community that we live in. And arts is certainly one of those things.
All right, thank you for that.
Sure.
So next up is Kate Brandt.
Hello, thank you, Jose, and welcome, Mary. Glad to meet you, Ms. Skipper.
Thank you.
I have the distinct honor of being the chair and CEO of Horizons for Homeless Children. And we are focused and have been for 30 years on the issues facing children experiencing homelessness with their families. We provide early education to over 400 children a year in the city of Boston. And we have extensive wraparound services for those children. My question to you today has to do with the fact that child poverty rates in the Boston area are more than double the average across the country. Research has shown us that high quality early education is clearly the most effective way to improve the likelihood of future success for children living in poverty. In Boston, there are too few early education seats to serve all of Boston's eligible children. And the early education sector is a complex mixed delivery system of center, school, and faith-based programs, as well as a very robust family child care system. How would you propose to actively collaborate with the early education provider community, which is vital to serving the needs of Boston's children and to the further expansion of the universal pre-K program? And it would be great if you could give some very specific examples of the processes that you might set up to build that strong partnership.
Well, first of all, thank you for your work, because this is a critical need area. So sure, I'll draw on this from Somerville. So as we started the work with early ed, we quickly realized we had to go all the way back to kind of prenatal, really, birth. And so we really had kind of home ambassadors that were working with new families to identify and make sure that they had the information of the services that they could actually access. And that included the resources across mixed delivery, because Somerville is a true mixed delivery system. So first of all, I'd want to kind of look at that kind of birth to 3 and sort of see what's going on there and how we might be able to build some additional resource there and structures so that we're outreaching to parents right at the beginning. And that includes play groups, getting them into networks and getting access to the information. I think when we get into the kind of the pre-K area, one of the things that we did that I think was pretty transformational, there had always been kind of a separation between the mixed delivery centers or the faith-based centers and the actual school side. And so we had to break down those barriers through, amazing work of our early education team. And a lot of that came from our children's cabinet, which I know Boston is forming a children's cabinet. That was one of, honestly, the 3 main priorities. And so what we were able to do was really extend in a very non-traditional way our coaching, our resources, our materials, our mentoring to a single point of entry system. So really kind of tried to break down the traditional barriers that keep public from the rest, because at day's end, they're all of our kids, all of our students. And eventually the students are going to be ours in kindergarten. So kindergarten readiness is something that we really want to make sure is solid and happening. So we would go in, do PDs, we would invite them to our PDs. We had deep partnerships with Head Start, which actually involved having classrooms in the schools as well. We had somebody that was overseeing specifically the mixed delivery partners. And that person's role was really coordination, information sharing, and making sure that the mixed delivery could take access. And what we saw was initially it was a little slow, and then it was very, very much the mixed delivery was hungry for that level of collaboration because they're all little islands. And the one thing that the district could provide was sort of the big ship to kind of come to. And without, dismantling, without stealing seats, any of those. And so then I think you get into sort of the placement and the issue of how many seats we have. And in the mixed delivery system, it has to be a balancing act. The mixed delivery need to be able to thrive because the school system itself can't do it all. And so how fast you grow and in what areas you grow makes a big difference. So what we did was to sort of audit and find out where the accessibility of the mixed delivery lay the most, and then the same with our seatage. And what we found was there was an equity. There were some parts of the city that didn't have enough seats at all, and there were other parts that had over. And so we did some recruitment of partners, and we made some other kinds of arrangements, like for us, of placements of pre-K classrooms. And that was able to really kind of balance things nicely. The other part of the pre-K that we heard loud and clear from the parents is the pre-K seats are not as helpful. And it actually is the reason that they go very homegrown sometimes without even a center if they can't be all day. The timing for the parent, of pickup across the city at a 1 o'clock or a 1:15 is just not feasible. So we did a deliberate partnership with our after-school partners to open up and get certified pre-K classrooms with after-school teachers to be able to extend that. And then part of the single point of entry is to help parents match their needs. So if a parent's saying, all I need is morning coverage, that's there. So when they go on and they look, they can do a query and they'll be able to figure that out pretty quickly. And in that way, it translated, ensuring it gets out to all language so that all the community is aware of it. We've been able to just do better matching. So I think there's lots of things that we could do in this area.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the answer.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Daisa Santana.
Thank you. My name is Daisa Santana, and I'm a proud BPS alumni. And today I'm the director of the Youth Development Network of the Boston Public Health Commission, which is a school-based case management program that works to re-engage students that are chronically absent back into their educational journey. We strongly believe, and data supports it, that education is one of the main social determinants of health. The Boston Public Health Commission has a long and strong relationship with Boston Public Schools through several school-based and after-school programs and other public health initiatives. My question is, what do you see as the root causes of the current rates of chronic absenteeism among BPS students? And as a superintendent, what new strategies will you implement to reduce chronic absenteeism? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. So I think there's actually many roots right now. I think the pandemic has certainly enhanced chronic absenteeism for students, particularly who might have been struggling in engagement to start. I think there's a lot of mental health is what we see as we go out and we talk with our chronically absent students and families. So it has roots in dysregulation, being out of routine and not being able to get back into it. Just being afraid of COVID, being afraid of bringing COVID home to family, to family members. Certainly, when students get off track, depending on the age, depending on the age, they have a difficult time kind of getting in routine and plugging back in. So at the older student level, students who might have already been repeating or feeling disengaged are now even more so. And so they just don't come back. Other students with anxiety or social anxiety, they frankly, it's scary to go back and try to plug back into a physical building. So there's a number of kind of causes, the trauma that a lot of people went through, loss of life that people went through, or grave sickness. So I think really with chronic absenteeism, we have to attack it in a way that, first of all, we have to use the data to understand who is chronically absent versus who's just absent. And they're really different markers. And then in that, I think we have to look at it and then really create kind of profiles of what's the support needed to address the issue. So if it's mental health supports, and it might be family mental health supports, then it's reaching out and with your organization and other organizations to get that support for the family. That might be the role that some of our social workers also can play within BPS. If it's more of an individual counseling issue, that's where embedded counseling can be provided, either in school but with the staff, or in school with some of our embedded counseling partners. If it is off track, this is where I think we really have to open up our educational options. I think we have to not assume that kids could just start back where they left off, because the fact is too much time went by for that. So this is where we have to, particularly at the middle and high school level, have other opportunities. There could be some bridge programs that need to be created that allow students some partial day as they're coming back in, and you marry that with social emotional supports. Some intense academic support could be literacy recovery or numeracy recovery that has to be a part of that. If it is, for students that it's an anxiety issue, Again, I think using some of the special education programming and some of the 504 programming that we have that can address and build programs for students that are suffering from anxiety as, again, a way to bridge and transition in. So it's a lot of outreach. So I think community engagement specialists are needed that can really develop a relationship with the family, not so much like you're in trouble, your student's not here, or you're in trouble, you're not here, but we miss you, what's happening, what's going on, and how can we help you? And I think it's, through engagement and those community engagement specialists that we can start to really do the deep outreach and then start to put some solutions in place depending on what the student and the family need. We have community engagement specialists in Somerville, and they go out, they visit the home. Sometimes they bring a note from the teacher for the student that just says, hey, I really miss you. I hope you're in class this week, just to make a reconnection. Or sometimes we'll have another, a student call that student, and just encourage them to, to come in and meet with somebody, whatever we need to do in order to re-engage where that student is, and then put the resources in place.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. This is Jose speaking. So next up, we're going to take a question from the public. Again, this one is submitted anonymously through the Superintendent Search Survey. And although I'm quite fond of the question, I promise you I did not develop it myself. But here's the question: how important are sports and extracurricular activities to you? And how do you make those parts of the program excellent while you are improving schools? So the parts being sports and extracurriculars.
Great. So, I think there are many, many students that don't come to school for math, science, English, and social studies. They come to school for lots of other reasons. And I think athletics, sports, extracurriculars, art, music, those are all pieces of why students feel that they can have gifts and they can show them, and it builds their self-esteem. It builds their peer group that can support them, and thus translates into motivation of coming to school. I think sports in particular, is whole child, right? It is the place where, if done well, can motivate around academics to do your best so that there's no issues to be able to play. It motivates around the physical development and health and the social emotional of how you work on a team through struggle, through challenge, through loss. So it teaches a great deal to our students about being part of a community. In Somerville, we've invested a lot of money in our sports teams, expanding them. Here in Boston, when we were in the high school network, did a tremendous amount with sports. At the time, there were organizations that were plugging in and supporting each of the schools and scholar athletes. I know some of that has changed, but finding some mission-oriented organizations that can continue some of that work and really help to support the students academically and grow that culture of being part of a team with the coach and being motivated as such. So this would be an area that I think falls into that after school, and weekend, and making sure that our menu is as rich and broad as possible for our young people. Conditioning also comes into play, and making sure that our students, and this was one of the challenges with the pandemic, students came back and they hadn't conditioned. And then they were trying to do what they did before. And like all of us, they discovered they couldn't. And, you had injury. So I think making sure that if somebody's committing to, a season sport or a 2-season sport, that they're doing conditioning off of that. And that gets built into the budget, and that gets built into the facilities plan as a mechanism for them to be able to work to stay healthy and in condition. And then similarly with the extracurriculars, I want to be able to expand the menu of extracurriculars for our students. School really should be something that is open beyond the school day. It needs to be a place where students could continue to gather, and that option has to be in the neighborhood for which they live. So if they're taking transportation back to that neighborhood, or they're taking public transportation back, we also want to have some opportunities for them to be able to plug in into other kinds of programming that isn't just about their school. And whether it's debate, when I think of the kinds of things, debate, or Greater Boston Breakthrough, citizen schools, or there's just so many of them that are available, again, are we getting the information to the students who could most benefit from that program? So we've moved to a single point of entry of registration for our summer programming and our extracurricular, because I think it's a way parents and students can see everything that's possible and then have a way to be able to make some choices about it, about what's right for them with the hours and the activities, making sure that gets out and there's registration opportunities through the various schools so that, you know, interpretation is available, everything is translated. And so you're making sure for our ELL community that they have full access, and that those activities also include the ability for our special education students to participate and benefit. So this is an area I would intend to spend a lot of attention and resource on.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. So next up is Marta Rivera.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Marta Rivera. I'm the Commissioner of the Boston Centers for Youth and Families, and also an alum of the Boston Public Schools. The Boston Centers for Youth and Families is a department of the city that supports youth, individuals, families, and through a variety of services and programs in partnership with nonprofits, city agencies, as well as businesses. So my question to you is, the Boston Centers for Youth and Families manages 35 facilities across the city, including community centers and pools, many of which are shared in facilities with BPS. As superintendent, what would be your approach to deepening the partnership between BCYF and BPS, particularly around expanding summer and after-school programming?
Great. So thank you for the question. And it's a fantastic network that already exists that actually is through the school. So right away, you sort of have a comfortability of students and families, and then you're deepening it with programming. I think I'd want to have some good conversations and look at the data, like who's accessing it. You know, what are barriers to a broader population accessing it? If we see some of that in the data from an equity lens, what are the resources that would be needed to do expansion, and for whom would we be expanding? You know, is it additional sites or is it capacity at the sites? And then what would you need from what would you need from the district office, from Boston Public Schools in order to support that? Is it that we could provide some of our personnel in it? Is it that we could provide resources or additional areas of the facility, you know, beyond what you already have, to be able to open things up? Is there a way, for instance, to be able to kind of marry like our health and nutrition along with what's happening to create supper programs, so that if students and families are coming in and families are doing pickup, they could eat there as well? And that might be incentive for students to participate and families to be engaged in it. So I would want to look creatively at how we could make sure from an equity lens, we're serving our broad communities, but particularly our communities where students might be marginalized and not getting access to opportunity. And then from there, really work in partnership to say, okay, then what do we do with that? How do we expand that? How do we improve the programming or expand the programming by talking with the families? And that could be potentially additional centers, or that could be potentially additional programming within that unit. This is exactly the type of thing, like with Children's Cabinet, where the city and the district work hand in hand in partnership to make this happen. And that's where you kind of get the rest of the community orgs and partners to kind of build in on it and build up that piece. So I'd be all ears to kind of hear your experience and the staff's experience, and to figure out how we could go deeper in the partnership.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. This is Jose speaking. So we've been collecting questions live throughout this panel. And we will now ask a few of those questions with our remaining time together. These are the questions that are from the Q&A function in Zoom. So the first, and I think we have two based on time. So the first question is, as a BPS partner in re-engaging, Sorry, I'm getting feedback from the one of the language interpreters. Okay, I think we're okay. All right, so the first question is, I'll just ask it. I feel like I'm hearing some feedback, but that's okay. As a BPS partner and re-engaging dropouts and off-track students, I wonder what role alternative education would play in the portfolio of high school options under your administration and how you would resource it. This seems particularly important now since so many high school students have disengaged since the start of the pandemic. So hopefully you got that question. If not, I can repeat it.
I could hear it. Thank you, Jose. So, I think this is one of the top priority questions for the high school work and the middle grades. So we at one time had a pretty broad portfolio of educational options, and I call it educational options as opposed to alternative ed, but some people call it alternative ed. I think the goal really is to meet students where they are, and that might be where they are with their engagement with school, where they are with their academics or their skills, where they are with their commitment or ability to be able to come in to a physical space and how often. We serve, when I was high school network, we were serving 19,000 high schoolers. There's not one size fits all, and not, you can have great, you can have great programming in each of the high schools and you can have mass core, but the reality is if the student's deeply off track, they're not going to be able to plug right into that. So how do you build your ed options as a menu for meeting students where they are, and then giving them options through that programming in a way that gets them to where they want to be? And they might not even know where they want to be, but it allows them to have that dialogue conversation and take action. So I would want to pretty quickly ascertain what our capacity is in alternative ed. Who's currently being served, how is that happening and going? And then I would want to reach out and start bringing in partners who have a successful track record in educational options with students, including for those that are in high school and leaving a 13th year program, where I think we need to look at students who are not quite ready to leave academically. They may technically graduate, but they don't have the skills to be successful yet in the workforce in the way they need to be, or at college. And how do we create some hybrid programming there in the 13th year that still allows them to get access at their high schools or a high school, and at the same time start to take footing in the workforce or take footing in the college? I think the middle school transition is the other one I worry a lot about, because students really start to show that footprint right around 6th, 7th, 8th grade. And I think that was enhanced because of the pandemic. Kids who were sort of off track in the 6th grade, then all of a sudden by the 8th grade, they were severely off track, and now they're heading for high school. So looking at that, incoming 9th grade, in 7th and 8th grade, looking at the data, identifying right away who are students that are going to need more supports, and then having that happen so that it doesn't take the student support team to then trigger that, but it actually happens right at the inception when the student's coming in, and you build that into the student's schedule. And then when you see that students are maybe not even with that level of resource able to continue accessing, that's when you draw on ed options as a way to be able to have programming outside and inside the school. So it doesn't have to be the student always leaves. It could be the student might be doing some credit work or some skill building in one area, someplace else as part of a program. But then on the other hand, they're taking some of their courses still back in school. That's the kind of hybrid work that we did. And that's actually what drove the dropout rate down, because we were able to look at each group of kids. And at the time, it was almost a 7% dropout, if I recall correctly, back, 2013. And that's a lot of students. That was like 1,500 kids that were walking out the door. And we took those students and we really tried to look at their history of academic or of schooling. And we could see this group needed this, this group needed this, this group needed this. We started putting those things in place. At the same time, for the students at the end, we started building out those options. And then slow but sure, our dropout started to fall and fall and fall till it was below 2%. And then at the same time, those students were all now geared up to graduate, but they still needed a great deal of skill. And that's where we built in a lot more supports for them in those last couple of years, so that when they did graduate, they could make up some of that. That has to all be fast-tracked because of the pandemic. That's not a Boston unique thing. I think it's an everywhere unique thing right now. But here in Boston, we feel the magnitude of it because of the number of students that it needs. So that would definitely be a priority check for me.
All right. So we are at 12:01, and I know we said we would go a little bit past 12 just because of the delay in getting started. So we're gonna leave it to one final question. I believe I'm correct in that. And so I'm gonna read you the final question, okay? So the question is, what have you done to advance the achievement of Black and Latinx students in Somerville? And what is the racial makeup of your leadership team in Somerville?
Great, appreciate the question. So when I came into Somerville, my team was almost all white. And I recognize that as a very big problem, given that we have majority of our students speak a language other than English as their first language, and our students of color. So one of the things I did was to start to develop a pipeline to get our talented educators of color in, and to a pipeline to promote our talented educators of color who might be teachers, but are aspiring to be an assistant principal or a principal, and to build that up. So the consistency of my team ranges between a third and a half now of, and it is very diverse. And that has, in my mind, made all the difference in the world in our being able to walk the walk with the community. I think, additionally, specific to the question about academic for our Black and brown students, where we saw it was in particular areas. We saw for our Black and brown students, they were not able to access, for instance, higher level maths. And why was that? Well, they were getting trapped down in 5th, 6th, 7th grade, and they were not given the opportunity to make the leap at the high school level. So we brought in Calculus Project. And through Calculus Project, we were able to work through summer programming and year-round programming, specifically for our Black and brown students, to build up math skill and to give them peer cohort of students who felt good and comfortable and saw themselves as mathematicians. And that resulted in a big jump in the number of our students of color taking our honors level and our advanced maths at our high school. We also made some detracking changes, which again had to be kind of brought to the community. But rather than have these kind of tracks of who gets in, we looked at how were students getting recommended for the higher level maths. And so we made some key changes that involved a balance of recommendation along with grades as opposed to assessment to allow them in. And so to allow students who traditionally had been marginalized and not represented in, and that was mostly a lot of my Black and brown kids. So those two things, for example, have changed dramatically. And as we follow the students, their achievement has stayed very high in the area of math. And I can give other examples: overrepresentation in special education, overrepresentation in suspension. I mean, there's particular areas where, you see, deep work that has to be done for our Black and brown students, that the system itself is the barrier. And that's something that for me as an educator, whether it was at Tech Boston, whether it was as the network soup, and in Somerville, has always been a core piece of my heart to make sure that we blow up those barriers, as difficult as those conversations can be.
All right, thank you. So that's all the time we have for today. And so I want to first thank our panelists for their thoughtful questions. I want to thank the public for your participation, engagement, and patience. I want to thank Mary Skipper for spending time with us. We have a full schedule of public interviews, and you can find that at bostonpublicsschools.org/SUPT-search. Our deepest apologies for the technical difficulties earlier. I'm so thankful that so many folks were able to still stay on and join. We hope to see you again later this afternoon for the next panel. So I know Mary's not done yet. And for the school committee interview this evening from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. And then again, tomorrow, we'll have a full day of interviews with Dr. Tommy Welsh. And so thank you to everyone and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.